Moment of silence for the champions, for those who make going hard a lifestyle. Never wait for nothing, gotta get it right now.
What's up, Packer fans? Welcome back to Cheesehead Talk. It's your boy Tramel, coming back with another video. And in this video, I'm going to predict the Green Bay Packers 2019 NFL season. I'm going to go game by game and predict the Packers record, and also explain what our opponents did this offseason. Now, last season I made a prediction video for the Packers, and I predicted that the Packers would go 12-4 last season. I was totally wrong. I wasn't even close. The Packers went 6-9-1 last season, and it was just a bad year for Packers football. So this season, I'm going to be humble with the predictions. Let's get to it. Kicking off opening night on Thursday Night Football, we head on the road to Soldier Field to face the Chicago Bears. The Chicago Bears are the defending NFC North champions. They went 12-4 last season, and they went 5-1 in the NFC North. Their only loss came to us in Week 1 with that miraculous comeback win that Aaron Rodgers led, coming back from an injury. But besides that game, they pretty much dominated the NFC North. And before the season began, I warned a lot of Packer fans that this isn't the same Chicago Bears team that we're used to beating 2 times a year. They're not the same pushover. They're not an easy team. And a lot of Packer fans didn't listen, and they got a rude awakening. The whole NFC North got a rude awakening. And now the Chicago Bears are the NFC North champions, and they're looking forward to making it back-to-back this upcoming season. Let's take a look at what they did this offseason. They lost some key guys, starting with their defensive coordinator, Vic Fangio. Vic Fangio played a huge part of the success that the Bears had last season. He had that defense playing really, really well last year, and they finished 3rd in total defense, 2nd in points allowed, only giving up 17.7 points per game, and also they had the #1 run defense. So Vic Fangio is a huge loss for the Chicago Bears. He's no longer in Chicago, and he is now the head coach of the Denver Broncos. Also, let's take a look at the acquisitions that they picked up. They picked up wide receiver Cordell Patterson, who's coming from the New England Patriots, coming off a Super Bowl year. He won the Super Bowl last season, and he played a huge part in their Super Bowl season. He played running back, he played receiver, he played kick return, punt return. I mean, the dude is versatile, and you put him in the right system, he can be dangerous, just like he was in New England. And I feel like he'll be dangerous in Chicago. So that's a good pickup for the Chicago Bears. Also, you look at the Ha Clint Dix. He just signed with the Chicago Bears. Me personally, I don't like him. And I just don't like the way how things ended with him in Green Bay. I feel like he quit on the team his last 2 seasons in Green Bay. And I don't feel like he's a good safety anymore. I think he's average at best. He might be good in Chicago. He might not. We'll see. And Chicago also picked up Chuck Pagano. Chuck Pagano is now the defensive coordinator of the Chicago Bears. They replaced Vic Fangio and picked up Chuck Pagano as their defensive coordinator. He has a little experience at defensive coordinator. He was the defensive coordinator for the Baltimore Ravens in 2011, and he has some experience as a head coach as well. He was the head coach of the Colts from 2012 to 2017. So this is pretty much the same Chicago Bears team. They lost some key guys, but they also picked up a few as well. And I think it's going to be a really good game. Week 1 will be a very competitive game. I think it'll be low scoring. I think it'll be very close. And Chicago's the home team, and I like Chicago at home. I think Chicago will win the first matchup between us, and I believe we'll start off 0-1. Moving on to Week 2, we face the Minnesota Vikings. It's the first home game of the season for us. We're at Lambeau Field. And you take a look at this Minnesota team. They had a disappointing season last year as well. They finished 8-7-1, and they ended up missing the playoffs. Coming into last season, a lot of people had the Minnesota Vikings as Super Bowl contenders. A lot of people thought that Kirk Cousins would get this team over the hump and take them to the Super Bowl, but that wasn't the case. It's the same story for Kirk Cousins. He doesn't show up in the big games. He can't win the big games. He doesn't show up big when you need him. And that was the story for Kirk Cousins last year. They ended up missing the playoffs, and they had a disappointing year. So this season, they're looking forward to bouncing back to where they were in 2017 and meeting the expectations that they had in 2018, which is get back to the playoffs and possibly make it to the Super Bowl. I believe they're still a good team. You take a look at their team and what they did this offseason, they're pretty much the same team. They lost Andrew Sendejo. He's a decent safety, but he's replaceable. They also re-signed Anthony Barr. He made a verbal commitment with the New York Jets, and then a few days later, he changed his mind, and he re-signed with the Minnesota Vikings. They also improved their offensive line through the draft and through free agency, so they'll be improved at that position right there. And then they re-signed tight end Kyle Rudolph. They gave him a 4-year extension, and they also drafted tight end from Alabama, Irv Smith. Me personally, I feel like Irv Smith was the third best tight end coming out of college. He's a very solid tight end. So they have a two-headed monster at the tight end position. And like I said, they're looking forward to bouncing back to where they were in 2017. They'll be competing for a playoff spot, and they'll be competing with us, Chicago and Detroit, for that NFC North title. But back to the Week 2 matchup. We're at home at Lambeau Field. It's the first home game of the season, and I like the Packers at home. I think they get their first win of the season, and they go back to 500 and go 1-1. Moving on to Week 3, we face the Denver Broncos at Lambeau Field. We have another home game. Now, you take a look at this Denver Broncos team. Last season, they finished 6-10, but they're not as bad as what their record said. They, out of the 10 games that they lost, 6 of them were by 7 or less points last year. So they were in a lot of close games. They can compete with a lot of teams. They can compete with anybody. And they're also young and they're up and coming. They also had a very good offseason. They had a very good free agency and a good draft. Take a look at what they did in free agency. The question mark that I have for them is the quarterback position. They traded for Joe Flacco. I don't think he's the answer, but we'll give him a chance and we'll see what he can do. Also, they signed tackle Jawan James. They gave him a 4-year deal. They also signed Bryce Callahan from Chicago and Kareem Jackson from Houston. And like I said, they had a very good draft. I like their first pick, Noah Fant. He's a very good tight end. He was arguably the best tight end coming out of the draft. He and his former college teammate, TJ Hawkinson, they were the best 2 tight ends coming out of the draft. So I like that pickup for Denver. They needed a tight end. Also, in their next pick, they got Dalton Renser. He's a solid offensive lineman, and he's going to help that offensive lineman a lot. And then their third round pick was Drew Lock, who will probably be the future of the Denver Broncos. And we could probably see him later on in the middle of the season. He might take Flacco's spot in the middle of the year. Just depends on how Joe Flacco performs this season. We'll see about that. But this is a young and up-and-coming Denver Broncos team. I don't think they're ready to sneak into the playoffs just yet. And I say that because they're still young, and then they're in a tough division as well. They got Kansas City in that division. They got the Chargers. And then the Oakland Raiders, too, who are up-and-coming. So it's going to be tough for them to sneak into the playoffs. But they're a decent team. But back to the matchup. Packers versus Broncos, Week 3. I give the Packers a win. We're at home. I like the Packers at home. And I say we improve to 2-1. Moving on to Week 4. We have the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, you look at this Philadelphia Eagles team. I believe they're the best team on paper. A lot of people will argue and say that the LA Rams, the LA Chargers, or even the New England Patriots. But me personally, I think it's the Philadelphia Eagles. And you look at what they did this offseason. They improved a lot too. They picked up Deshaun Jackson. He's back with the Philadelphia Eagles. He's the deep threat. He can play in the slot. He can play on the outside. They also picked up Malik Jackson on their defensive line that was already stacked. He's now with the Philadelphia Eagles. He's a solid pass rusher. He can get to the quarterback. And their defensive line became even more stacked. They also picked up Andrew Sendejo from the Minnesota Vikings. He's a decent safety. They also re-signed Brandon Graham, Jason Peters, Ronald Darby. So this is a very stacked Philadelphia Eagles team. And I like what they're doing. Back to the matchup. I think Philadelphia will get the win. I think they take the win at Lambeau Field. I think we get our first home loss of the season and our second loss of the season, and we go to 2-2 on the year. Moving on to Week 5, we face the Dallas Cowboys at Jerry's World on the road. Now I can't wait for this game because I will be in attendance. Me and my pops. I'm gonna get us some tickets, and I'm gonna have to save up because those tickets are expensive, but I'll be there at the game, and I can't wait for it. But you take a look at this Dallas Cowboys team, and I think they're slept on too. I think they could be Super Bowl contenders, honestly. They had a top 6 defense last year. They were number 6 in defense. They only gave up 20 points per game. Also, look at what they did in the offseason. They picked up Randall Cobb. I think he's a upgrade over Cole Beasley, due to the fact that he can stretch the field and he can make bigger plays than what Cole Beasley can do. Cole Beasley is more of a short yardage guy, and if he stays healthy, he'll be a big pickup for Dallas. Also, Jason Witten came out of retirement. He's back with the Dallas Cowboys now. I'm not sure what he'll do when he comes back, but he might be a positive for this Dallas Cowboys team. And then also, my favorite move that the Cowboys had this offseason was trading for Robert Quinn. Robert Quinn, man, he's a stud. And you put him around some monsters on the defensive line, he can get double-digit sacks. They already have DeMarcus Lawrence, who's a guy who will get you 15 sacks. I think Robert Quinn can get you 10. And with that addition, I think Dallas could be a top 3 defense, honestly. Their secondary is still iffy at the safety position, but that front 7 is very solid, and they were number 6 in defense last year. Also, they're tough at home. They went 8-1 last year. Their only loss came against the Tennessee Titans on Monday Night Football, and I feel like that was a fluke. They're a very good home team. So I think the Dallas Cowboys get the win, and the Packers fall to 2-3. I know Aaron Rodgers owns Jerry's World, but I think that comes to an end this season. I think this is a different Cowboys team. Their defense is different. They're much better. And I believe they can be Super Bowl contenders this year. So I have the Packers falling to 2-3. And moving on to Week 6, we face the Detroit Lions. This is a very underrated Detroit Lions team. Man, they're slept on. A lot of analysts are sleeping on these Detroit Lions. They can really make some noise. They could really win the division. I wouldn't be surprised if they snuck into the playoffs. They have a lot of up-and-coming young players like Kerryon Johnson, Kenny Galladay, Quandre Diggs. They have a lot of talent, and they had a very good free agency as well. It was quiet, but it was very good. They filled a lot of holes that they needed. Let's take a look at it. They signed Trey Flowers. Now, me personally, I don't like the Trey Flowers pick because I think Trey Flowers is overrated. I think he's just average. I don't think he's that good. I think he's overpaid and overrated. But he could be good in Detroit. He's reunited with Matt Patricia, so we'll see how that goes. Also, they picked up Danny Amendola. He was with the Miami Dolphins last season, and he's a former New England Patriot. He's a solid slot receiver. Also, Detroit picked up tight end Jesse James from the Pittsburgh Steelers. He's a good tight end, and Detroit needed a tight end bad, so he fills in that hole. They also picked up slot corner Justin Coleman. He's another solid pickup for the team. And you take a look at their draft, their first-round pick, T.J. Hawkinson. I like the pick a lot. He was the best tight end coming out of the draft. He can block, he can catch, he can do everything. And after the first-round pick, I believe they had a poor draft. But other than that, their free agency was pretty good, and they're up and coming. They got a lot of talent at a lot of places. Their only problem is their offensive line. That's their biggest problem going into this season. If they can get that together, then they can sneak into the playoffs, and they could possibly win the division. But back to the matchup, Week 6, we have a home game against the Detroit Lions. And I like us at home. I think we'll get another home win. And I think we'll go back to 500 and go to 3-3. Moving on to Week 7, we face the Oakland Raiders. Now, this Oakland Raiders team has slipped on too. A lot of people are criticizing and ridiculing Coach John Gruden. A lot of people don't like what he's doing with this football team. And a lot of people think that they'll be a bad football team, but I don't think so. I think they'll be much improved from what they were last year. I don't think they'll be a playoff team, but I think they'll be right there around the 500 mark. And you take a look at what they did this offseason. They had a busy offseason. They traded for Antonio Brown, who's arguably the best receiver in football. If not, he's a top 3 receiver. They also signed wide receiver Tyrell Williams from the LA Chargers. He's a big, fast, speedy receiver who can catch the ball. And they also picked up offensive lineman Trent Brown. They picked up safety LaMarcus Joyner from the Rams. They picked up linebacker Vontaze Burfict. And then you look at their draft, man, they picked up Cleveland Farrell with their first pick at number 4. Now, me personally, I like Cleveland Farrell a lot. He was a very solid college player, but I don't think he should have went number 4. I thought they should have got Josh Allen or even Ed Oliver, but Cleveland Farrell, he's a great player, and he could do something in this league, so I'm not too mad at it. And also, they picked up Josh Jacobs with their other first-round pick. He's a solid running back. They filled another hole that they needed. So this would be a much improved Oakland Raiders team. I wouldn't be surprised if they're over 500 this season. But back to the matchup. Packers versus Raiders at Lambeau Field. We're at home. I like us winning at home again, and we improve to 4-3 on the season. Moving on to Week 8. We face the Kansas City Chiefs on the road. This is the toughest part of the schedule. Just like last year, we played the Rams, and then the following week we played the New England Patriots. We have something similar here. First, we start off with the Kansas City Chiefs, who were probably the best team in football last year. They had the league reigning MVP, Patrick Mahomes. He had 50 touchdowns and 10 interceptions. They were the number 1 offense in football, and they were just unstoppable last year on offense. It was hard to stop this team on offense. And you look at their defense last year, they were pretty bad. They were top 5 in sacks, but other than that, they were pretty bad. They finished 31st in defense, and they kind of remind me of the 2011 Green Bay Packers. But let's take a look at what they did this offseason. And they lost some guys. Of course, Kareem Hunt, he's no longer with the team. He's now with the Cleveland Browns. The Tyreek Hill situation, I'm not sure when Tyreek Hill will be back. I'm not sure if he'll be back or when he'll be back. But if he comes back, that'll be huge for this team. They let Justin Houston go in free agency. He's now with the Indianapolis Colts. So that's a big loss for the Kansas City Chiefs. They also traded away their other best pass rusher, D Ford. He's no longer with the team. They traded him away. And then eventually later on, they would trade for Frank Clark from the Seattle Seahawks. Also, on defense, they picked up Tyrann Mathieu from the Houston Texans, and then they picked up Alex Okafor from the New Orleans Saints, and then they picked up Bashad Breeland from the Green Bay Packers. So they're looking to improve this defense. I don't think they'll be as bad as they were on defense last year, but that pass rush won't be there anymore. But I don't think they'll give up the big plays, as many big plays as they did last year. But on offense, I feel like that they'll take a step down a little bit, especially if Tyreek Hill's not there. I think they'll take a big step down. I think they'll still be good, but they won't be nearly as good as they were last year. But back to the matchup, Week 8, Chiefs at home against the Green Bay Packers. We're on the road against the Chiefs. And I think we'll steal a game here. I think we'll steal a game in Kansas City. They're not invincible at home. It's possible to get a win, and I have the Packers beating the Chiefs on Sunday Night Football, improving to 5-3. Moving on to Week 9, we have another tough opponent, another team that's arguably the best team in football, which is the LA Chargers. A lot of people think that this team is the most complete team in football. They think that they have the best roster on paper, which they probably do. It's arguable. But you take a look at this Chargers team in the offseason, they really didn't make much noise. They signed Thomas Davis to add to their defense. And then they lost wide receiver Tyrell Williams, who is now in Oakland. They're pretty much the same team as they were last year. And they're looking to win their division and get to the AFC Championship this year. They're looking to win a Super Bowl this year. They're Super Bowl contenders this year. Just like they were last year, they really stunk it up in the playoffs against the Patriots last year. But they're looking to bounce back and get back to the playoffs and make some noise this year. But back to the matchup, Chargers versus Packers is pretty much a home game for the Packers because LA doesn't have home field at all. Packer fans travel very well, and I think we might steal another road win. I think we'll take another win on the road against the LA Chargers. They really were in a lot of close games last season. They won a lot of close games, and I don't think that they're as great as everybody thinks they are. But I think we'll get a road win and we'll improve to 6-3. Moving on to week 10, we face the Carolina Panthers. Now, this Carolina Panthers team, this is a team that could be either very good or they could be bad. And I'm not sure how Cam Newton's health status is right now, but I don't know if he'll be healthy by the time the season starts. We'll see about that. But you take a look at what they did this offseason. They pretty much added to their defensive line that was already pretty good. They had a pretty good front seven, and they pretty much added to it. They signed Bruce Irvin, who just came from the Atlanta Falcons, who had a good impact on that Atlanta Falcons defense last year when he got signed in the middle of the season. Bruce Irvin is a guy who can have some monster games. They also picked up another defensive lineman, Gerald McCoy. He stays in that division now, and he's with Carolina. He's another guy who can have some monster games as well. He's battled some injuries over the years, and he's declined a little bit. But if he can get back to his old self, his Tampa self, then this Carolina Panthers defense can be very dangerous. But back to the matchup, week 10, Packers at home against the Carolina Panthers. I like the Packers. We're at home. I give us another win at home, and we improve to 7-3. Moving on to the next week, week 11. That's the bye week. I like that we have a bye week this late in the season because it gives players time to rest, and it's not too early. It's at the perfect time of the year. Week 11. Couldn't ask for a better bye week. Moving on to week 12. We go on the road to face the San Francisco 49ers. Now, last year, they were supposed to make a big jump and possibly make some noise and try to make it to the playoffs last season with Jimmy Garoppolo. But that wouldn't happen because Jimmy Garoppolo tore his ACL the third week of the season last year. But he'll be back as the starting quarterback. And they also added some people in free agency. They got better. And this year is the year that they should try to fight for a playoff spot. I wouldn't be surprised seeing this team make it to the playoffs, especially if they stay healthy. And take a look at what they did in the offseason. They signed Quan Alexander. He's a solid linebacker. They also signed running back Tevin Coleman from the Atlanta Falcons. That's a huge pickup. Now they can get the run game going that they much needed. Also, my favorite pickup that they got, Jason Verrett. Jason Verrett, he's a very solid cornerback, and he's just the only reason that he hasn't done anything is he's battled injuries over the last 3 years. He hasn't been on the field at all. But when he's on the field, he could play. He's a lockdown corner. And I believe if he can get back to his old self and he can stay healthy, that's a steal for the 49ers. He'll be a very solid corner. Also, you look at what they did in the draft. They picked up Nick Bosa. He was the best pass rusher in college football and arguably the best player in college football. And they also picked up Deebo Samuel in the next round from South Carolina. He's a very solid receiver. He's got a little bit of speed on him. He's got great acceleration. He can catch the ball. He can play in the slot. He can play in the outside. He's got good hands. And he was one of my favorite receivers coming out of college. So this is a much improved San Francisco 49ers team. And I believe this is the year that they should make a jump. And I think this is one of the games that the Packers won't have anything going for themselves. I think this will just be a bad game for the Packers. And I think the 49ers will win this game. I'll give the 49ers a win. And the Packers go down to 7-4. Moving on to week 13. We go on the road to New York against the New York Giants. Now, this is arguably the worst team in football. They really don't have anything positive going on for themselves. I'm not sure what they're doing, what they're trying to do. But the only positive thing that they have going for them is Saquon Barkley. And me personally, I think Saquon Barkley is the best running back in football. He's amazing. I mean, the way he makes people miss, his speed, his size, his ability to break tackles, his ability to catch the football, make big plays. He's just amazing. And he's doing this with no offensive line. And he's really the only positive thing that they have. You take a look at Eli Manning, man. Eli Manning is trash. It's time for him to hang it up. I think it's time for him to hang it up. He should have hung it up 2 years ago. His time is up. And they traded away their best football player, Odell Beckham. They traded him away for the 17th pick and for Jabril Peppers. I'm not sure what they're trying to do right there with that. Also, they let Landon Collins walk. They let him go in free agency. He's no longer with the Giants anymore. And they signed Golden Tate. But Golden Tate, he's getting up there in age. And I think he's on the decline now. So I'm not sure what this New York Giants team is trying to do. They're a pretty bad football team. They're arguably the worst football team in the NFL. And I say the Packers get an easy win at MetLife Stadium. And the Packers improve to 8-4. Moving on to week 14. We have another home game against the Washington Redskins. Now, you take a look at this Washington Redskins team, and they have a very solid defense. They have some good names on their defense. They signed Landon Collins. They drafted Dwayne Haskins as their quarterback, and then they picked up Montrez Sweat with their other draft pick. I like Montrez Sweat. He was one of the best pass rushers coming out of college football. But the Redskins, they have a very good defense. But the offense is going to be the problem this year. They don't have receivers. They don't have weapons. Their best weapon is probably Jordan Reed, and he hasn't done anything since 2015. He's been battling injuries. He's been inconsistent. He just hasn't been the same Jordan Reed that we've known him to be. And also, their number one receiver is probably Josh Doxson. And if he's your number one receiver, then you're in trouble. And you're really going to struggle as an offense. They still have Adrian Peterson. He can make some big plays here and there every now and then. But I just don't see this Washington Redskins team doing anything on offense. And that's really going to hurt them. And that was a big reason why they dropped down to 18th in total defense last year due to their offense. Their offense couldn't score points at all. When Alex Smith went down with that injury, they just completely just shattered. And their defense went from a top 5 defense all the way down to 18. And I think HaHa Clinton Dix had a part of that as well. When he came to the team, they got worse on defense. But I'm not going to speak on HaHa Clinton Dix anymore. But this Redskins team, I'm not sure what they're going to do at the quarterback position either. I'm not sure when Alex Smith will come back. And Case Keenum, he's not the answer. And I think it's too early for Dwayne Haskins to start. So the Redskins really have a lot of question marks going into this season. And I think they'll kind of be a bad team this year. I think they'll have somewhere between 5 to 7 wins this year. But back to the matchup, week 14, Packers at Redskins, Lambeau Field. I give the Packers another win. Packers improve to 9-4. Moving on to week 15. We go back home to Lambeau Field against the Chicago Bears. Chicago comes to Green Bay. It's our second matchup of the year. And I feel like Green Bay splits the season series with Chicago. I think we'll split with Chicago this year. And I think the Packers improve to 10-5. 10-4. Moving on to week 16. We have another division game, but now we're on the road and we go to Minneapolis to play the Minnesota Vikings. Now, Minnesota, we haven't won in Minnesota since 2015, and I don't see us winning this year either. I think Minnesota's a very good home team. It's hard to play in Minnesota, and I think they'll have a bounce back year, and I think we'll be fighting for the division with Chicago, Minnesota, and Detroit might be in the mix as well. We're going to all be fighting for playoff spots around this time of the year. And I like Minnesota at home. And I think we fall to 10-5. Moving on to week 17, our last game of the season, and it's against the division opponent. And we go on the road to Detroit at Ford Field to take on the Detroit Lions. Last game of the season. Probably going to have playoff implications on the line. Probably going to have the NFC North title on the line. Not sure how it's going to look, but I'm pretty sure we're going to be fighting for a playoff spot at this time. Fighting somewhere in the standings to get home field advantage or something. But week 17, we play the Lions on the road, and I think we'll get a win. I think we'll sweep the Lions this year. We haven't beat the Lions in the last 2 years, and I think we'll get them twice this year. I think we'll get them both in both meetings. I think both games will be good, and both games will be close. And I think the Packers finish 11-5. I think it's going to be an 11-5 season for the Green Bay Packers. We have a new offensive coordinator, new head coach, new offensive scheme, new talent that we added on defense, good draft picks, and I think we'll be much more improved from last season. I think it'll be a totally different year than what it was last season. And I'm very excited to see what we're going to do this season. It's going to be very interesting to see what's going to go down for the Green Bay Packers this season. But let me know what you guys think. Tell me what you guys think, what the Packers will go in the 2019 NFL season. Let me know what you guys think our record would be. And share the video. Leave a like and subscribe to the channel. And go Pack Go.